Hey there, everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. But my name's Dan Nicodemo. I am a longtime fan of politics, you could say. Most recently, I've been working with some grassroots organizations in Arkansas for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Big Bernie fan, been following Bernie since about 2009. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about targeted volunteering and organizing smart. So some of what I say may come off as kind of no duh to some of us who have actually done a lot of volunteering and organizing before, but just going to reiterate some things that I guess every volunteer should know, and more importantly, every volunteer organizer should know about how to make the most impact with your time and energy. I'm going to go ahead and share my little presentation here with everybody. Give me just a moment. I was a little fancy with mine too, so bear with me. So part of what I'm going to talk about, of course, is the current climate that we're in politically. Most of what I'm going to touch on really has to do more with volunteering for political campaigns and in the political sphere. And so the first thing we're going to talk a little bit about is just the climate of where we are, and that is we're in a really volatile and tumultuous time in terms of politics. There's a lot of misinformation out there, not only due to the volatility of data on the internet, but also a lack of integrity in the media, which I think those of us who have really been following closely in the current primaries, I think we'll all agree that there's a lot of misinformation coming out of the media. There's also a lot of anonymous voices out there adding to the cognitive dissonance. You know, just being on social media, being on the internet at all, I'm sure you have all encountered these people who like to spew pseudoscience and scream at you and call you terrible names, and things like that are actively dissuading folks from paying attention and being a part of the process. This is despite the fact that we are in this incredibly technology-connected world with access to all this information. It's kind of a double-edged sword. More and more, we're also seeing political campaigns are adopting technology, following data-driven principles when it comes to outreach and organizing. That is, of course, most obvious in terms of canvassing and using voter files to actually reach out to people, phone banking, etc. The problem with that is that political campaigns are still largely controlled by the old school, the establishment folks who like their systems and like the old way of doing things because there's all kinds of little rules built in that benefit them. So you know you're dealing with all of these awesome technological tools that really can't be used because, well, people just don't want them to get used. So we're stuck with all of these old models of behavior and action that are not producing the kind of results that they should. And I think this is a number that I like to talk about a lot, and that's the 9%. That is the amount of our population that actually picked Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to be the two main party candidates. 9% of our population has determined the course of the rest of our country. So that's kind of where we are right now. And the problem is voter turnout has been on the decline worldwide, not just in America, over the past 40 years. There are a few, I'm going to post this presentation up into our Slack channel as well, because there are going to be, these links are all clickable and stuff, and so I've sourced a lot of this, and I'll fill in some stuff that's missing. But voter turnout has been on the decline worldwide, especially in America, but really across all of the major democracies. Despite leaps and bounds of technology, the most effective way of reaching people is through canvassing. There's actually a really excellent paper by Ryan Enos and Eaton Hirsch that's coming out in the American Political Science Review that they actually did a very good empirical study on the effects of canvassing over several election cycles. It's an interesting read. You can actually read the whole thing online right now. And they pretty much prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that canvassing is still the most effective way to reach people. However, because of the way that establishments, politicians, and operatives like to run their campaigns, what you end up getting is what we're going to call a voter-volunteer mismatch. I don't want to really talk too much about the last line of this, but nobody in the establishment really cares that the volunteer system right now doesn't work because they're getting tons of money in campaign contributions to put ads. So you see with major campaigns like the Clinton campaign, you know, these volunteer groups really don't get much direction from the top. And that actually is particularly true in the Sanders campaign as well, although that was, of course, a little more deliberate, the whole idea being grassroots outreach. So the problem then, recapping, is that we are getting a mismatch between voter and volunteers. And what I mean by that, let me expound on that a little bit, and more importantly, the solution to that is targeted data-driven person-to-person volunteer organizing. And what that really means at the end of the day for all of us is, well, basically you need to put the right people in front of the right people. Person-to-person, first of all, will always be the best way to get a message, specifically a political message, out. There is an energy between people. There's so much research to just prove that person-to-person interaction is the best way to get responses from people. Folks act a certain way when you're actually standing in front of them, that they're more engaged. They can't just kind of tune you out like they can with a TV. There's a surprising amount of research to show this. Meeting someone face-to-face also kind of removes any artificial barriers of communication, like you can't lose signal, you can't have a typo, you can't mislink something. It's just you and the other person communicating with your mouths. Another benefit to that, of course, it's cheaper. I mean, what's cheaper than walking next door and talking to your neighbor? Beyond that, you get all kinds of intrinsic value from the standpoint of a campaign when you think about members of the community seeing other members of the community out doing things. At the very least, they'll ask questions. And at the end of the day, campaigns are about people. It is the whole purpose of politics is people helping people and building something that is made of people. Folks are going to be more willing to trust folks that they perceive as living members of their community rather than just some voice on a phone. I think we can all probably agree on that. So moving a little further forward, when I say targeted, what that means is not just, hey, go knock on a bunch of doors and spread the message. I'd have to say that Bernie's campaign is kind of guilty of this. We had a lot of super, super excited, enthusiastic volunteers willing to walk across the country to spread the message of Bernie, and while that's all well and good, there are some downsides to that. Targeted means picking a group and going after them. You have to think about it a lot of the same ways a marketing company looks at their advertisement campaigns. You have a message. That message is going to resonate with a certain group of people more than another certain group of people. To maximize that message's impact, you should expend your hours and your work energy targeting the group that is most likely to resonate with your message. It doesn't seem like a big, logical leap for those of us that have worked with data before, but for folks who are just putting themselves out there to your community or maybe just testing the waters of organization, this seems to be something a lot of people are missing. This isn't just good advice. This is stuff that is actively not being done. This was rampant in Georgia when I actually moved here from Arkansas. A lot of the grassroots organizations here were just like, you group of people, here's a script, go to this neighborhood. And there was very little use of available data technology to kind of like locate folks who would actually understand and appreciate the message. Data-driven, I of course was talking about targeted data-driven research. Specifically for political campaigns, you have access to an unbelievable amount of data on people. You have their voting habits out in front of you. You have the political party that they claim to be affiliated with. You have their birth date. You have their work history, maybe, depending on which campaigns you're working for. Some campaigns have more money than others. But there is a lot of data out there, and working even in casual capacities with some of these groups, it astounded me the amount of data that was being ignored or just not being used at all. A lot of times it felt like having these big voter sheets was just kind of like a bragging right for some of these organizations. Just like, oh, well, yeah, my organization team, we've got we bought $50,000 worth of, internet data to use in our local area. Meanwhile, that data wasn't actually being used for anything except the message. There would still just be groups of volunteers going off into the world with, wandering around in places where the people might not really want them there. A perfect example of this, we had these group of girls from New York who came to Arkansas to help us canvass. really great, really smart, very well versed in Bernie, and all very, very well spoken and passionate, and very thick New York accents. And they started rural areas in northwest Arkansas with people who were descended from mountain clans, and then all of a sudden these Yankees knock on their door telling them that they should let taxes go up so that we can afford to buy new playground equipment. And these are folks who, meanwhile, are struggling to put food on their families' tables and keep their family farms operating. The data was there for the canvassing director to know that the neighborhood he was sending these people into was full of blue-collar, working-class, traditional, I know y'all can't see my air quotes right now, but traditional Arkansas families. And seeing a well-dressed Yankee with a thick accent at their door trying to tell them about socialism just triggered these folks. And we got the first death threat I ever received was from someone saying if we sent any of those Yankee bad words to their house again, they'd show up with guns. So that brings us to kind of the why we want to use targeted data-driven research, and that is shoot the messenger syndrome. Something that for some reason mainstream political campaigns have not figured out is that folks will shoot the messenger. If the person giving your message is somebody that's going to immediately incite revolt or disgust for any reason in the person you're talking to, that's it. That message is done. It's gone. And this paper by Enos and Hirsch kind of points to that. It's the mismatch between voters and the volunteers reaching out to them hurts more than it helps because of shoot the messenger syndrome. It's really, really crucial as we all move forward into this brand new frontier of grassroots organizer. Some of us are going to become leaders in our communities. It is important for you to not only tailor your message to the people in your community, but the messengers. While it's great to have this huge, vast resource of volunteers, which Bernie Sanders did, the Sanders campaign had this great network of volunteers, the problem was that they were largely all part of the same demographic. And while that wasn't entirely true, obviously, especially near the end of the campaign, it became a much more diverse group of people actually out in the field. But early on, that actually tended to be a hindrance and fed the media narrative of Bernie Sanders suffering among minority groups. And it wasn't really that he was suffering there, it was that the message wasn't getting through because the right messengers weren't delivering it. And this is obviously almost out of the realm of what a common volunteer should worry about, which is why I say put emphasis on the organizers. It's up to you to utilize your resources appropriately. That being said, as a volunteer, there's a lot you can do to be a good volunteer. And even in the cases where you're mismanaged and put in a place where you shouldn't be necessarily, there are ways that you can maximize your impact. To begin, if you're just interested in starting off as a volunteer in the political spectrum, college, young and Democrats and Republicans meetings, absolutely the best place to go. You're going to be in rooms full of young and old people who are really passionate about politics, and a lot of times local politics. That's actually where I got my start, I guess semi-professionally in politics, was at the Young Democrats of Arkansas meetings. Social media, obviously, I really doubt anybody that's listening right now is not aware of social media and the power it has and power it gives us to locate candidates, people, things that are important to us. So obviously, as a volunteer, you can use social media to find a lot of opportunities to volunteer. Google everything. That's kind of just all-around good advice, though. Just Google everything. If there's something on your mind, Google it. I don't understand why more people don't just literally type their questions into Google. It's really baffling. Using tools like Tumblr and Reddit to find people and causes worth supporting. I mean, the Sanders for President Reddit, I mean, those of you who lurked it and worked on it, I mean, they were an incredible resource for the campaign. Everybody from the top to the bottom of the campaign would go there from time to time. We got our news from there sometimes before we got it from mainstream media. So, and another place to begin, obviously, talk to literally everyone. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I want to try to scooch it forward a little quicker here. Being a smart volunteer, it's one thing to organize and create a really good organization and put people in the right place. But as a volunteer, you need to be smart and you need to be useful the best way to do that is to talk to everyone. You don't even need to really be a formal volunteer to do this. Just talk to everyone. This has always been my #1 source of information about a community. It is always my go-to when I'm trying to learn the ins and outs of a particular demographic, because I go and talk to those people. Just if I'm standing in line, walking down the street, you should, if you're in a cause that you believe in and it's something that you think you are actively working towards, you should be talking about it all the time to anyone who will listen. You never know what how your words can affect people. You never know how a sentence you say could change somebody's life. You may put a thought into somebody's head that's never been there before and ends up consuming them, and before you know it, you've created another activist like yourself. So always talk to people. The most useful thing you can do as a volunteer is spread information. So do it. Talk to anyone. But don't just spread stupid information or wrong information. Be knowledgeable, and not just about your own stuff. Just as important as it is to stay up on Bernie's tweets and read articles on the Daily Kos and Alternet, go to Breitbart once in a while. Go to Fox News once in a while. See what your opponents are saying so that you're better prepared for it. One of the worst things that can happen to a volunteer is they react to something that the other side says in a public manner because they frankly weren't prepared for it. You should be prepared for everything. So be knowledgeable about both sides of where you are. Kind of seems like a no-brainer, but again, you'd be surprised how many people are just completely ignorant to what the other side thinks about these issues. And while we as progressives know that we're absolutely 100% right, it's still useful for us to go to the wrong people and kind of try to see where they're coming from. That being said, have a thick skin. People are going to be mean to you no matter who you support or what you support. When you put yourself out there, there's going to be people that resent you for it. So be prepared. Have a thick skin. Be able to deal with insults and people spitting at you and throwing rocks at you. Just remember, you're on the right side of history. As long as you feel confident that you are, then be that way. Deal with people's insults. Deal with their ridicule. If you're knowledgeable, you'll be able to defeat them every time. Be ready to sacrifice. A good volunteer knows what it means to actually volunteer. You need to not only be willing to give up your time. In some cases, you may be giving up your space or your money or, who knows, your skills, anything. Be ready. If you're really serious about a cause, be ready to sacrifice a lot for it. Things don't get done when people just half-ass it. Things get done when people give everything. Staying informed, obviously, #1 thing a good volunteer can do is just always be informed of everything as much as you can. Consume as much information as you can. Once you found a place that gives you reliable information, go to it always. Obviously, always bring donuts if you can as well. Always a good idea. But yeah, that about sums it up. I had a lot more. This is just because I can't have a completely serious presentation or I'll get fired from life. But I'm sure there's more, and I'll be available in Slack to talk more about this too. But the #1 thing is just, be deliberate. Choose to make yourself visible. Choose to be somebody who is a leader. Don't just sit back and be quiet and nod your head and go where they tell you to go. We have access as smart, technologically inclined people. We have access to a wealth of information that no other generations have ever had access to. And a lot of it is not getting used by the people who are supposed to be in charge of us right now. And, we can't wait for them. Folks, the reality of our situation right now is our entire species is facing extinction. That is fact. That is happening right now. We cannot just sit back and wait for somebody to come along and solve our fucking problems for us. It isn't going to happen. So all of you, if you feel that fire in you and you feel like, okay, something has to happen, you got to do it yourself. And there's an easy way to do that. Talk to everyone all the time. You don't even have to say much. You don't have huge debates and start fights with people like I do literally every day because I'm super confrontational. But I know for a fact I have swayed hundreds of people to at least get involved. They may not end up voting the way that I want them to vote, but I've seen people who I know have never voted before lining up to vote. And it's only because I talked to them, said a few words to them. So don't be afraid to speak up. just make sure before you do, you know at least a little bit about what you're talking about. Otherwise, people like me are going to be there to ridicule the living crap out of you. So thank you, everybody. I hope this was helpful to some people. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Castillo here.